Right. So for everybody on the YouTube, we're just getting ready, getting set up. We're waiting for the opponents to come and join the stream. We won't be long. We'll be starting as soon as my brother says he's ready to go.
All right, let's do it.
Ready to go when you are.
All right, I guess who wants to start with the 5-minute opening? Was it?
I don't think I can speak for 5 minutes, but I'm pretty sure I can open.
All right, we're going to give the opening to the globe.
Okay.
All right, Kosh, whenever you feel like beginning to speak, I'll start the time. Wait, can he speak or is he muted?
Kosho, mic check.
He's muted at the moment. Oh.
Wait, what happened?
We're ready for you to give your 5-minute opening for Globe Earth.
All right, I'll start whenever you when you start. So we start now? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't really have anything set up, a point to make. So I'll just start by saying that since we've been looking up at the stars, at the planet, that we live on, we've probably been wondering what it is, what's out there, what is everything. And people have made guesses, and people have made strange fairy tales, and they've been passed down until some men in Greece, some thinkers, they actually thought about, how do I calculate these things? If this thing's in the sky, if this thing's circling around us, how can I calculate? How can I measure these things? And they made some crude attempts with actually some pretty novel ideas, sticks in the ground, that sort of thing. And they got pretty close. I think at one point we thought that the moon and the sun were of the ratio of the moon was 9 times bigger than the sun, 90 times bigger than the sun, or the sun was 90 times bigger than the moon, but it was also 90 times further away. And they calculated this by knowing that they appeared the same size in the sky, and they would do amazing things with angles, and knowing that it was a half moon, and so a 90-degree angle would be the exact position of it. So these were educated guesses. That's a good word to use, educated guesses. But we also weren't complete, So you move down to the Greeks, and then the Romans. They kind of took ownership of the world, and they kind of used the same math and technology that the Greeks used to try and map out the world and map out the distances in the stars. And they built their amazing buildings, and then they fell, and then the world went into dark ages, and this knowledge was forgotten, and people were again making stuff up and making guesses and doing this and doing that. And it wasn't until the Renaissance in Europe, mainly Italy and England, when they broke away from the church a little bit. I think it was who was it? Copernicus came up with his system of the bodies circling the other bodies, and they try to make sense of this. I think that Giordano Bruno also believed this thing. He was a priest, and he was advocating these movements, and the church put him into trial, and they ended up setting him on fire because he was fucking going against the church. And it wasn't until a British dude who was bored in his house one summer doing nothing, he decided to try to figure it out. Try to figure out what Galileo had measured with his telescope and seen these moons that were circling around Jupiter. Try to make sense of it all. And he came up with the idea that maybe those are circling that thing, and we're circling the big thing, and it's all circling each other. But of course, anybody can make up a theory, like people have been throughout history. But it's another thing to come up with measurements that work based off mechanics that also work. And it turns out that those measurements held up. And he also improved on the guesses that were made 2,000 years ago that were close, but they weren't accurate. And so they found even closer measures to these planets and these stars, and the size of the Earth, and the structure of gravity and how it works. And it basically it all came together for the next 300 years. There were a few holes, like there always were, but it was still coming complete. Mercury wasn't understood. It was doing a weird, funky orbit. And then, of course, I'm going to wrap it up by just including Einstein with his theory and his improvement on gravity was improved Mercury's orbit, and it all kind of it all fit into place, gravity. And of course, in 2018, we still have holes in the theory of gravity and how it works, very minute holes based on observations in space, which may not be an issue with gravity. It may be just another phenomena that we don't understand. But the truth is, our completeness of understanding all these things is found in the exactness of these measurements and how they can predict exactly when light is going to be warped around a sun, or when a satellite is going to be sent to the outer rims of the solar system, bouncing off the gravity of bigger systems or bigger planets in our system. So these measurements had to have been exact for these calculations to have been made. Yeah.
Are you finished?
Yeah, I was just fucking rambling, so I'm good to go.
Okay, go ahead, Plank.
Okay, so everything you just said is based on history that we can only consider mythical and fantasy. Changing the position of the sun with the Earth is nothing but philosophical. You can't disprove it either way. Aristophanes' experiments, he made 5 assumptions, all of which were wrong. The distance between Alexandria and Syene, that Alexandria is due north of Syene, that Syene is on the Tropic of Cancer, the Earth is a perfect sphere, and that light rays emanating from the sun are parallel. And we all know that light does bend, and it doesn't exactly go straight when it comes from the sun. We can see that with crepuscular rays. And God, you made so many points. What else did you say? So
Don't worry about it.
we see the sun similar in size as the moon. And as far as like Mercury or Venus or whatever, retrograde motion, that invalidates the Big Bang theory because you can't have something come off one explosion and then everything coming off one explosion will fling in one way, right? So if you're on a merry-go-round and something jumps off on one side and something flies off on the other side, it's going to all go in one direction. They're not going to be able to start having retrograde motions. And you can't explain this with gravity because that's explaining away the conservation of momentum, right? Like you can't explain that away with gravity. And you try to explain away with general relativity, but that's still a theory and no one can prove general relativity. And you were talking about satellites. Well, we don't even have any pictures of those. And all the pictures that they take is CGI. And if you'd like, we can move on to actual flat Earth facts, which is empirical observation along with rational inferences drawn directly from observation itself. And we can start with the Bedford level experiment. So if the measurement is close enough to the surface of the Earth, assuming light rays can curve downward at the rate equal to the mean curvature of the Earth's surface is ludicrous, right? Because you're saying, like, in that case, that the two effects of assumed curvature and refraction cancel each other out, and the Earth just appears optically flat in experiments. And you're assuming that the Earth is 24,000 miles in circumference, and then assume refraction equals the curve of the assumed ball while you're observing a level plane. So that's just ridiculous what you've done.
And I want to back up some of Citizens' claims. Is the supposed knowledge that you have is all based on assuming first a curve, right? Assuming first that we are a spinning ball spinning through Earth, and you've got to have a lot of coincidences to line that up. You know, the Earth spins around the sun at this perfect 60,660 miles an hour. The moon just happens to be exactly the same size as the sun when you have eclipses. That we happen to be tilted exactly 66.6 degrees from center. But what lacks in your model is empirical evidence, because when you actually bust out a telescope and look horizontally, we do not see that curvature.
Yeah, so you're adding in the assumed curvature and refraction to equal the mean curvature of the Earth. And whether you go, it doesn't matter how you look on a ball, you should be able to measure curvature. So whether you do a small scale observation like the Bedford level or look at large scale like world record photography, it doesn't work for the globe math. Many people with telescopes prove it's a level surface and gravity doesn't inward pull towards a center mass. Like you'd be able to measure that curve, right? And so basically sphere earthers expectation value is the curve of the Earth. How much the sight line deviates from that is measured refraction. They add curvature and use that as the baseline, and they measure what the refraction is from that baseline number.
Was there anything else you guys would like to add to that opening statement?
I'd like to say that the whole heliocentric conspiracy is perpetrated by Freemasons. We've got a lot of proof that all of the proponents of the heliocentric model were Freemasons, and it's backed up by murder and suppression of history. All religions before this current NASA religion has always believed the Earth to be flat and domed, but only in this current janky, shady, if you will, religion is it ever a ball spinning through this concept of space that has very little bearing on actual reality.
All right. I guess we could go ahead to 3 minutes to Kosh or any globe earther to start with a specific topic they'd like to discuss.
Wait, that was the opening? I thought that was like the point. Okay, would you mind giving me just 60 seconds? I have to take my stuff to my car, start my car. 60 seconds. I
Okay,
swear.
Bitter, you get to open the first topic.
Well, I'll throw the topic out there, and I don't know if she knows anything about that fucking ellipsoidal thing. Well, you know what?
Let's stay on topic. Let's stay on topic. Would you admit that everything you think you know is all derived?
Hold on, citizen. It's their time to pick the first topic. So
No. It's just fine. It's fine. I don't need any time. Go ahead and ask that question. It's fine.
Well, I was thinking he was trying to change the topic. I was kind of wanting him to respond to the curvature.
We'll give him the first topic because he's got the first 3 minutes. Like, what is your point, your proof, your argument?
Okay. I'll just go ahead and then leave off where I pick up where I left off. But first, I'll address some of what you said. Although I have to admit that even the stuff I put in my head to remember, I've already forgot it. So, you did say something about curvature, so I'll go ahead and say that. For me, I was compelled when I found out about these distances that were, or these buildings that were seen beyond distances that were calculative, supposed to be not unseen. And that was until I found all the equations for perspective and what's it called? Refraction, and the model or the simulator that you could put these in. And actually, they had a simulation for specifically the one you said, the Bedford level test. And it turns out that there's other things that come into play when you can see these distances. One is that they're obviously the refraction, which can make things that are just slightly further away appear like they're closer, and that's different on different days. The other is that curvature equation is only an average. It's that people keep assuming that it's the same everywhere on Earth when it's possibly the same. It probably applies little to nowhere on Earth. It's in some places more flat and in some places far more extreme, like 7 miles deep or 5 miles high, and rigged hills and all sorts of things. So that didn't compel me once I found that out. It would only compel me if there were things like, a country that you weren't supposed to see that you can see now. That's neither here nor there. So going back to gravity and the fact that it works and it was perfected, or it was modified to the point of almost perfection. It seems that a world and a universe that were not these ball-shaped objects, these objects that coalesce into spheres, like you have the stars that are pressured by the mass of the amount of gas they have, that are pressured so much so to create fusion and a shine. And then you have places like Jupiter, which are not big enough to become stars, but they're made of just the same kinds of gases that are just the same way that, like, they're forming these balls based off the gravity and the mass of them. And then you have planets like ours, which it would seem like if it were flat, it would not work. It would crumble and it would fall until it was round, which was actually probably how it was formed. It was rocks thrown together that gravity brought into place, and after a billion years of crashing around together, they just formed into a nice, beautiful ball. And people think that maybe it's a special place, and it's how coincidental that we just happen to live on a perfect place that has all these perfect qualities, like the core, which creates a dynamo, which creates a magnetic field surrounding it, which protects us.
We're gonna give Effie a chance to respond.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm not sure what exactly the topic is, because it started with the Bedford level and curvature and ended with gravity and planets.
We'll just say gravity.
Okay, so everything everything you just said, yeah, I mean, he's right. You did kind of deviate from curvature a lot, but everything you think you know about curvature is all derived from numbers based on assumptions. Like you assume light travels in straight lines and you're trying to triangulate a triangle with curved sides. But so on one part of your model, you have all these parallel lines of rays of light. And then the other part of your model, you have things like a selenilian eclipse, where you have light rays supposedly trying to bend around the entire curve of the Earth so we can see the sun and the moon in the same sky in the lunar eclipse at the same time. That's not possible. And one would have to abandon their model unless they could find a rational and like explanation for that observation. I rest my case.
In that curvature thing, you know, if you're looking through a homogeneous environment, like if you're looking through a homogeneous medium, if there is not a change in density, there is no refraction. So to think that the refraction of air, which is 0.0029 or something of that minute nature, can curve light at a U-turn is absolutely preposterous by your model and your science. And so a great example is in astronomy, they say that the sun or stars at the horizon equals 34 arc minutes of refraction, which is half of a degree of refraction over the course of the entire atmosphere, right? And whatever distance it's shining through on your ball model. So to say that objects are curving at the 8 inches per square mile, which should be observed but isn't, is entirely preposterous. And I challenge you to find me a crisp picture of any kind that shows the curvature of Earth.
That was a challenge, wasn't it? Sorry, I knew I forgot something in here.
Okay, you have a minute and a half to rebuttal.
Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. You have what is the curvature of the Earth and not understanding it. I will throw my model into the chat text box, that simulator, and it's filled with the mathematics of fractions, which show exactly how possible it is for all these things that are claimed to not be able to be seen. It shows exactly how they, at one point, appear below the horizon on the other side, and then how they appear up in front of it other times. And it also shows you that on a flat plane, due to perspective, you'll never see the horizon unless there's a mountain or a tree or anything like that in front of it. You'll never see the horizon just hide something, because there's nothing to hide behind. I'll also, and I know you've already seen these, so we'll go ahead and just show you again. But you brought up the crepuscular rays and how the sunlight's not coming in parallel to the Earth and not then seen as diverging lines, which they are. They absolutely are. And we've showed you this model, but I'll show you again just for closure. Let's see, you brought those up. You asked me to show you a picture of the curvature of the Earth. However,
that is time.
Yeah.
So are you requesting more time, or are you shooting it over to?
No, I'm just going to let you know that the only people that left the Earth were astronauts going to space. And I don't think that if I showed you pictures from these people, you would count it as evidence. So well, I can't show you a picture, but I can show you a test. So I'll put it all in the text box, but I'll let you go. So I have a test of the curvature of the Earth.
So I'm going to use that excess time that we have before Citizen starts our next topic and say that everything that you said, I'm challenging you to prove any of it. I think that you said a lot of gobbledygook. I think that your model is fake. I think that you're not producing any evidence whatsoever. And I would like our audience to be aware of this fact that our globers do not present any actual evidence.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. You can go watch videos of time-lapse photography from different days of the year, different years even, at the same spot, where people are observing clear line of sight across lakes, where you can clearly see it's flat and it's level and there's no curvature. And then a different day, a time lapse will show the water rising and lowering and the distortion. It's called compression refraction. And the buildings and the trees on the other side will even compress down and you'll lose them. It's phenomena you're not even attempting to explain, and you're using it to create a model with an assumed curvature, and you take that curvature number and you add refraction to equal it so your model works. And that's all they're doing. It's actually pretty simple. People really should just look at things like the Bedford level. People should look at things like the Bedford level and go do their own observations and look across water and see if you can see farther. Take a pair of binoculars to, you know, a lake or an ocean. And that's all.
Right. Since I guess now the topic is on us on curvature, take a telescope and find the curvature. Find that 8.8 inches per mile squared of curvature drop that you should see when you look at horizontal. They've got tons of curvature calculators online that you can use that account for the height of the observer, and we regularly see things that are completely impossible on a globe model. And the best explanation that globes have is that curvature happens, refraction happens at the exact rate of curvature, which is utterly preposterous. In that scenario, you would be able to see the sun when it's night. It's just a lie. It's just a bunch of bogus BS. So I challenge anybody. You can take the FE Corps did laser tests over miles distance where they accounted for the atmospheric pressure, and they shot through as near of a homogeneous medium as you can, and they found dozens of feet of missing curvature. Just like all of your observations, when you see something that is too far away, where it should be hidden by a wall of water, they're trying to tell you that on the most crisp pictures, the most crisp, clear days for viewing, that you're seeing somehow a mirage or an inversion. Like, these are people that are straight lying to you. It's the messed up photos. It's the choppy days. It's the ambiguous camera positions. And it's the stormy days that give you any kind of stretched, distorted, and clipped image that shows curvature. But on the clear days, you have very little distortion, and tens, hundreds, thousands of missing feet of curvature. Come on, give me a break. Use your own brain. Don't let people lie to you. How much time do we have, Gaylord?
You've got about a minute and a half. If you'd like to let GE respond, that's fine.
Yeah. Move that to our rebuttal or to somewhere later.
All right, go ahead, GE.
All right. I don't know. Like they have. No, they're not for some reason. It's fine. I have pictures showing the corpuscular rays, but we're not even worried about that. We're worried about the curve of the Earth. And so I do have a simulator, which you've all seen. If you like to see it, I will take the time to find it and load it up in here. But it's, yeah, like I said, it explains to you perfectly why and what conditions you would see things that at other times you cannot see them. As a matter of fact, if you're able to join my room, I do have pictures from another place. It's real life pictures. It's of buildings that at some point can be seen, and other points are not being seen. And this is true for all of the phenomena that we see when people show us these pictures. Okay, it's not from things that are 500 miles away. It's not from things that are on the other side of the world. Okay, it's from things that disappear, and by the way, as they disappear, they are cut off from the bottom up, and then after a while you don't see any of it at all. This doesn't sound like something that you would see on a flat plane, which the horizon never ends. So there's things like the sun and the moon, which are said to be circling overhead of us, but in fact as we witness them, no matter where you are on the earth, they're seen to be cut from the bottom up and then not to be seen at all. And there's places like the Burj Khalifa where you can see the sunset and then watch the sun disappear and then climb the elevator to the top and watch it again 5 minutes later. And this is not something that you would see on a flat plane with no curves. It's something that would be curved all the way around, that is circling, that's spinning, and you're actually just losing view of what's over there. And what's between you and what you're not seeing anymore is not infinite plane or a plane that's going until your eyes can't see anymore. It's a curve. There's something in between you and this thing. So it's difficult to say that it's proof that things that are a little bit further away than, but you can see them, than they're supposed to be based off an equation that's not accurate. And we know that because we are told that the shape of the earth, actually, it doesn't matter what we're told about the shape of the earth. You know that everywhere you are, there's hills, there's mountains, there's some flat areas, but it's not, that curvature equation is not going to exist the same way everywhere you are. And we have a gravity detecting device, satellites, which actually can detect the gravity change in every place on Earth. And so we know that the gravity is not uniform on the Earth either. So there's that equation is very nice because it'll give you an approximation. But when you're wondering why you can see something that's a little bit further away than you're supposed to, and some days it's closer, some days it's hidden, you find that there are variables that come into play that allow you to see these things. And it actually doesn't seem as miraculous as before. It doesn't seem like the world is actually flat. It just seems like, okay, well, there was something I didn't calculate. And like I said, I'll go ahead and post this when I'm not speaking more. I'll go ahead and post this simulator in the box, and we can check it, and we can check for places that, like I said, often aren't seen, often are right there in front of our faces.
All right, now FE can rebuttal.
So as far as your claim about gravity meters, all you're measuring is the downward acceleration of objects. You're not, and if mass was attracting mass and it had anything to do with mass and distance, why is it that your gravity equation changes around the surface of the Earth, especially in places like the Hudson Bay? And they try to explain it by the 10,000-year ice age and mantle convection, but that's all just theory. Everything you're going off of is an assumption, and you're just believing it.
In your curvature, every picture that you're showing has echo. Every picture that you're showing that has curvature is some stormy, humid, messed up day, and the pictures that we show are clear, crisp images. And I'll leave it up to the viewers to determine if they're retarded or not, and what they're seeing is a mirage. Like this picture is 2,600 feet of missing curvature, and it has nothing to do with a hill. Right, this is a still body of water where the waves are not going to obstruct your view of the buildings. Right, when it's a homogeneous medium, when refraction takes the least effect, we see way farther than we should. Pull me up your stormy pictures, pull me up your crappy day pictures, your distorted mirages, and tell me that that's evidence of curvature, because I would like to debunk them one at a time.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I was doing something while you were saying. You want me to debunk your pictures? Yeah, I've told you I can post a simulator which will tell you that a building that is just a little bit further than you're supposed to see it, it's not that odd that you can now see it based off of the fact that maybe that area is not as curved as you said it was. Maybe there was refraction that day, because these same buildings that we're seeing here in Seattle. I'm sorry.
I just want you to be aware that we're moved on to the next topic, and it's your turn to make the next topic.
Oh, I thought you were asking me. Okay. I thought you asked me to debunk all those.
Well, I'm asking you too. That's fine if you want to waste your time, but
no, it's fine. Okay. Well, here we go then. Let's talk about something else. I got a picture to throw in here. Hopefully, it'll let me do it this time. So, you already know that we'll stay on curvature because sometimes it's difficult to see it, and it seems like that is what some people will only say on that. They won't worry about the science. They won't worry about the physics that it's allowing us to talk on these phones right now, which are based off of quantum mechanics, which are based off of Einstein's theories. He wrote like 4 papers in 1905 and got credited with all of them, and they were attempted to be disproved, and they were never disproved, and they created this technology. So we're going to assume that gravity works the way it works. I mean, as these aren't assumptions. These are based off of empirical evidence. These are based off of engineering feats that were based off of these theories. So these are not just some, imaginary features that we're just hoping work. We know they work because we use these measurements to make things. And so I posted in there some dimensions. I don't know why my pictures won't come through, but I'll have to post it in a second. So I'll just explain it. If you notice the line of latitude at the equator, if you were to take any lines of longitude, which they go 180 degrees east and then they go 180 degrees west, each one of those lines is 69 miles at the equator between each line of longitude. So between 0 east and 10 east, it's 690 miles. And you'll notice that as you climb north, those lines, the distance between them shortens. And it shortens by, I think it's cosine. Then you use the cosine of the latitude, and you multiply that by 69. I think that's correct. Right, and then the number of lines of longitude that you're going to be measuring. And if you notice that 690 miles between 0 east and 10 east, become shorter and shorter as you move up lines of longitude. And as everybody probably agrees on, they converge to a single point, which we call the North Pole, which is why if you look at a flat map or globe map, whatever, you'll see the North Pole in the center, and then you'll see these lines all meeting up at the North Pole. And now this is something we can agree on. Now, what's odd is that if you go south from the equator and you make the exact same measurements, you'll also get 690 at the equator. But you would imagine on the maps that we're seeing for the flat Earth, which are not agreed on, but it is the most popular maps, they go outward and they diverge. So you would think that each distance between them, starting immediately, including 1 south, latitude, you would imagine that 690 between 0 east and 10 east would grow, when in fact they don't. They actually match exactly the 1 north measurements, and they match perfectly the entire way, so that if you're at 30 degrees south and you're at 30 degrees north and you're measuring the lines of longitude, they match up. And so one would conclude that they also converge to a single point at the South Pole.
All right, we'll give
impossible
a chance to respond
on a flat map.
Now, I want to start on this first place. Echo. Kosho, echo. I want to start on the first point that you made, that you somehow said that relativity and gravity had anything whatsoever in any way, shape, or form to do with microprocessors, and I want to call you on your bullshit. I'm saying this is bullshit, and I would like any viewer to look this up and see that that statement is absolute bullshit. Relativity and is not used anywhere in quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics is not used anywhere in relativity. Einstein did write a paper on the photoelectric effect. He did not discover it. He only measured it, and he got a Nobel Prize on that, and that does have to do with quantum mechanics. But his theory of relativity, which dominates the cosmos and shapes your reality, has absolutely nothing to do with microprocessors. And anybody who develops microprocessor or silicon technology has nothing to do with relativity at all. And to assume or say so that your phone is proof of gravity is fucking stupid. Do not even bring that shit into this house, because I'm calling absolute and utter bullshit. I'm tired of that lie that because microprocessors and cameras work, that means that gravity is as they said it was. It means that the cosmos are as they said they were, when they are two completely ununified, unrelating fields of mathematics. And Citizen, if you want to, I don't know if you're familiar with this map topic.
No, go. He can respond to that if he wants.
So basically, I don't know if anybody understood what Kosho was talking about, the maps in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere. And he's basically saying that on a map, if you were to go on the map and you were to go from North Africa to South Africa, the longitude and latitude lines, they will work. And my position is that basically he's using Google Maps. Okay, a different source than Google Maps, but it's still the same thing as Google Maps. Maps are superimposed on the geography. Like, it's an imaginary thing we use to represent geography. And you cannot use the imaginary to prove the physical. Like we say, prove the curvature, directly measure the curvature, right? And they say maps. So if you go south, the lines of longitude go together, right? Well, who's to say that they didn't just put that on the map for shits and giggles? Longitude lines are imaginary. They represent something, but they are not a real thing. You cannot point to me to a real physical thing that is a line of longitude. Only what longitude represents. So I would argue that he's using Google Maps to prove the globe Earth, right? He's basically saying Google Maps can get you to a pizza place anywhere on the continent, so that's proof we're on a globe. And I'm calling bullshit on that as well.
They've been using plain sailing and great circle sailing and all that for a long time, and they use it way more than they ever used like spherical trigonometry or for any of their types of navigation.
And what's interesting about those lines of longitude is when anybody has actually circumvented the Antarctic, they said they were off by their dead reckoning was off by 20 miles a day. Like, they just weren't going as far as they should, implying that the Antarctic Circle is way bigger than they are letting on. So there is lots of evidence of fishy, funny business involved with longitude in the southern hemisphere. And just because it works, the maps work on a continent, is in no way, shape, or form whatsoever proof of the curvature of Earth.
Yeah, they have something that's called dead reckoning, and sailors in the southern hemisphere run into a huge problem. They measure where they're at on a map, and then they measure how fast they're going and the winds and all that. They try to compare it, and sometimes their dead reckoning is off like 20 or 30 miles
per day of sailing at a slow pace. They're off by 20 miles a day. And the shipping, it's kind of easy to hide when, if you look at a global map of shipping, a heat map of shipping transits, almost no ships travel east or west in the southern hemisphere ever. And I think that's our time.
Yep, GE has a minute and a half to rebuttal.
All right. I'm just going to take some time to build back my credibility. I think it was suggested that what I said was stupid, and then words were put in my mouth that I didn't say. I brought up Einstein's 4 papers and how they led to quantum mechanics, which led to the processors in our phone. I didn't say which one specifically. So I didn't say gravity or relativity. I didn't say anything like that. I said his theories. They hold up. And we use them, and they work. And yes, the photoelectric effect is what led to quantum mechanics. Having said that, we'll move on to what they were saying about maps being erroneous or whatever. They're not erroneous. They work in every case. You don't hear, in the extreme case of Australia, people being 2,500 kilometers off from their destination, which would happen if these lines diverge instead of converge. And these numbers are not imaginary. They're very much not just used for Google Maps. The lines of longitude and latitude are used universally throughout the world. These lines are accepted by everybody throughout the world, and they hold up. They hold up to the point to where Australia, which is 115 degrees east, I believe, as far as 140 west. So this 35 lines of longitude or more, you could say that they're warped or they're confused or whatever you want to say about them. But if you measure, and I put the calculator in there if you'd like to use it, but if you measure any distance in Australia, in Africa, in South America, they don't hold up to a diverging longitude and latitude. They hold up to a converging longitude and latitude, and that cannot be corrected by fooling sailors or whatever it may be. You can't fool that. The sun, it's going to be noon every day on the lines of latitude at the same time, the lines of longitude at the same time, all throughout the world. So if it's 115 east, it truly is 115 east, and that can't be fooled. And I'll just finish off by saying there's no way to reconcile this point. If the lines converge when you go north, you understand that it means a single point. If they also converge when they go south, there's no other truth to the fact that we live in some three-dimensional, a surface where it converges both in the north, both in the south, and these points meet. That's two poles. You don't have that on a flat surface. You can't create that in a piece of paper with a flat surface. You can create it with a diamond or a sphere, but unfortunately, we do not observe a diamond structure. It seems to be curving nearly uniformly, which would suggest that we live on a spherical, oblate thing, whatever Neil deGrasse Tyson says. And I don't think anybody in here is stupid. I don't think anything you guys said was stupid. And I'll finish right there.
All right, 3 minutes for the next topic, Effie.
Well, I think you brought up some interesting points, because the only kind of conclusive evidence that you have of lines of longitude being accurate beyond continents, from continent to continent, would be the sun in the heavens, because there's nothing on Earth that correlates directly with the lines of longitude that can be measured. Which brings me to the holographic nature of our view of the sun, and why Eratosthenes was wrong. Because corpuscular rays all but prove that we have a local sun, but it's holographic in nature. You know, if you change position, you're looking at a different sun. You cannot triangulate the sun on a flat plane, hence the curvature of Earth. But Eratosthenes didn't account for refraction, so how could he possibly be so accurate within, 30 kilometers of the Earth's radius? And corpuscular rays are the smoking gun, the proof that not only is the sun local, but it's also what we view is the apparent sun, and we actually don't have a clue where the actual sun is. And this would explain why the lines of longitude apparently converge towards the center. It would explain the southern hemisphere as well. Do we have a model that accurately explains that? No. Is there theories? Is there a tried and true tested mathematical model for it? Not yet. But this is a taboo subject in scientific community. Do we have theories about how it works? Yes. And I would like to step back, because the only proof of curvature is the direct measurement of curvature. There are other possibilities to explain other phenomena, but unless you directly measure the curvature, you cannot prove curvature. If you directly measure the plane to be flat, that is proof of a lack of curvature. What happens in the heavens is a system. Why do we observe what we observe? What exactly is what we observe? Good questions. But the only way to prove the curvature of Earth would be the direct measurement of the curvature. And I would challenge people to explain how corpuscular rays are due to perspective when the distance of the observer does not change greatly.
I'll be honest with you that due to my current situation, I didn't hear much of what you said. I did hear that you brought up corpuscular rays and you brought up curvature, and you attacked my my measurements and how they could possibly be something else. And they're based off the sun, which is actually not the sun, but something else that's not real. So I'm not even going to go there with the sun. The sun is a massive object in the sky. It's 93 million miles away, and it is a nuclear fusion reactor. I mean, this stuff I can get into, but I only have a minute and a half probably. So I'm going to bring up the pictures. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm going to bring up the pictures that I threw in there. And those pictures are of the artwork of Mr. Lightwick, and he had made these to show that light that's coming from 93 million miles away, which actually do appear to be parallel as they come in, and they appear from the side view to be parallel as they enter the Earth. But from here on Earth, they do appear to be diverging, which is the phenomena that we see in the sky, which is not explained away by a near sun. It's also explained by a distant star. And so when observations and measurements tell us that the star is 93 million miles away and nothing tells us otherwise, throwing it out the window just because, we confuse the phenomena of them coming in diverging, even though they're parallel, it's you can't just throw it out because it's included in our model. It makes sense with our model. And about the curve, you said you wanted to measure it directly. I put something in there with somebody measuring it using a theodolite. The truth is we only have human eyes, okay? The human eyes that attach their cameras to human rocket ships and went to space, we can't use those. But there's people who went up there and took direct pictures of this thing. But like I said, we can't use that. So we use measurements like theodolites. I put that in there. We use reason, like the map of our planet and the measurements of that. And I'm not sure if you can include that, I guess. But we also see what we witness, and we see that buildings and the sun and these objects, if they were on a surface and not curving at all, you would not see the sun ever disappear. You would always be able to see it, whether from a mountain or from anywhere. And buildings would never appear halfway. They would appear to be getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared. So there's, I guess the last thing, if I have time, is the sun, if it were still in the sky, even though it was some distance far away that we couldn't see it, but it was still on a flat surface, and it was shining light on the moon from that distance, we would be able to see it. So it's not on a flat surface. It's sitting behind a curve on a curved planet, on a round, spinning, curved, beautiful planet Earth.
Effie has a minute and a half to respond.
I like how Globers, they try to add a gobbledygook and gobbledygook into everything. They like to switch around the subjects and merge multiple subjects into one. But what we were talking about is crepuscular rays in the sun. And with crepuscular rays, the definition, the reason why crepuscular rays look like a triangle is mainstream says it's perspective. And I would challenge you to look at a picture of perspective and know what perspective is. Artists use perspective all the time. Your brain interprets perspective. Like if you look at these railroad tracks, even though they are converging into the center point in the distance, you can still tell that they are parallel because you can interpret perspective. But when you have crepuscular rays where the distance does not change, yet it still makes this triangular shape, that is not due to perspective. And this is the flat earth kind of like pulling the hair out of our heads, kind of what the hell is wrong with you? Because this is a very obvious thing. And the only thing it takes to recognize this is intellectual honesty. So I would ask the audience to see if this picture of railroad tracks, the effect of this picture, these railroad tracks making a triangle in the distance is the same as this crepuscular ray that I'm going to present.
That's the end of your guys' rebuttal.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have time for one more new topic from the Globe side?
Yeah, that's up to you. I'm at Chick-fil-A right now.
Let's get Bitter Blue in on this. Let's do it. Let's do it after round, right? Bitter Blue, what's your best blue volume?
This is not my purpose here. This is Kosho's thing.
Well, you're my partner, but I mean, I wanted to see if maybe if you have something to say about the because you said you do geography. I mean, is it possible that the lines in latitude and longitude, is it possible for them to be incorrect, or I mean, don't these measurements have to match up to? I mean, don't we use them in every facet of the planet? Like, do they ever magically change?
I fail to see how people would be able to use these maps accurately for a very, very long time, and like everyone uses them universally. I fail to see how they could be wrong if they are used accurately repeatedly. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have more on that to say. Like
Well, I had one more point that I'll bring up very quickly because it was brought up earlier, and I want to stress about it. And I know no one likes to talk about the heavens for some reason, but they're not actually heavens. It's actually just the world we live in. We live on a ball spinning in space, and that space is real. And so we do have to talk about the things that appear in the sky, like the sun and the moon. And the sun and the moon behave in such a way that we are in a ball. It doesn't behave in a way where it would be circling around some flat surface. And I don't want to get into the path of the sun and why that makes no sense no matter what you would do on a flat surface. But the sun and the moon specifically, their relationship and the phases of the moon, they always correlate to an orbit around the Earth, and the Earth orbiting around the sun, to the point where when it's this total solar eclipse, it's on the phase of the new moon, when the moon just happens to be right in between the sun and the Earth. And the eclipse happens to be when the sun, or the lunar eclipse happens to be on the sun, the phase of the moon, when the full moon, when the moon is behind the Earth in between the sun. And when it's a half moon, you can create an angle with two sticks that would happen to be a right angle or a 90-degree angle, showing that it is perpendicular to the position between us and the sun. And so the measurements and the observations, they only fit with this model, with this understanding. And someone brought up the some phenomena, I don't remember what it's called, but basically it's where the lunar eclipse is in between the lunar eclipse is occurring, but yet you can see both the moon and the sun at the same time on the same night. Well, you would happen to, even in your head, if you're imagining the Earth between the moon and the sun, one on each side, you have to imagine that there is people on top of that point. There's people who can see both the sun and the moon at the same time. And so this is not a weird phenomena, and I hold my tongue.
All right, 3-minute response from Effie.
All right, Citizen, we haven't heard from you. Hit him on one of his points.
So as far as the moon and the phases, you can go outside and look, and sometimes they don't always seem to match up with the way the angle of the sun rays are hitting the moon and the way the terminator line is on the moon. And you keep bringing up like light bending and light not bending. So I don't know where you stand on how the light works. So if you're trying to measure the light rays from the sun, you assume they're parallel. But then when you're talking about eclipses, you're talking about light bending everywhere. And you said that people could see selenilian eclipses different. I don't know if you were trying to say that one person could see the sun and another person could see the moon, but that's not what happens. What happens is the same observer from the same location can see the sun and the moon simultaneously above the horizon at the same time. And that's impossible on your model. And you can measure the moonlight versus the moon shade, and it shows that the moonlight is colder than the moon shade. And you can do all the tests you want, but when it's a full moon and you go out there at night and test it yourself, you'll get this to happen, and you don't have to even have anything near you. You can just use a tree and go out into a field and have nothing around the experiment and show a 2.5-degree difference from moonlight to moonshade. No wind, nothing. Try it yourself.
And that selenilian, where the moon and the sun are both in the sky at the same time, when supposedly the moon is casting a shadow on the Earth is supposedly casting a shadow on the moon. Not only is that wrong, because you see the sun, it's bending around Earth, right, to hit the moon, The Earth can't cast a shadow when you can see them both at the same time. It's geometry. Even if you use refraction, geometry still says that that is not possible. And the biggest red flag that any observer should actually seriously consider is that the shadow of the Earth is on the opposite side. Like you have from the top down coming down the shadow of the Earth. So they're saying that not only does light bend, but the shadow also bends. And the shadow is the wrong size. You know, if you were to look at the shadow of the Earth on the moon, you'll see that the size of the shadow, the angle of the circle of the shadow doesn't line up to the supposed radius and radius of Earth compared to the distance of the moon. Right, there's holes all over the place. If you actually look into it, that's the thing, is they've swept so much of this under the rug. But the evidence that, you know, maybe Rahu and Ketu, because we've seen Ketu in the sky during eclipses, who knows what it is? But we have verifiable evidence that their model, the heliocentric model of the Earth casting a shadow on the moon, is wrong. Look at a selenium, it's smoking gun evidence. It's irrefutable via geometry. And Globies may try to say that the shadow bends, but I'm just calling bullshit.
G, you have a minute and a half to rebuttal, and then we can close off with 3-minute closing from both sides.
It's pretty easy. Yeah, I didn't say anything about light bending, actually. I just said that there, and I mean, you can say it's impossible. Truth is, it happens. So you have pictures of it. So instead of having to imagine that it's possible, just know it's possible. You can be on a point you can imagine a basketball or a spinning globe in space or whatever you want to imagine. But there is a point on that ball where you're on the top of it. You're on the position that is in between the Earth and the sun and the moon, and you can actually see both objects in the sky. And when you see it, you say the angle is coming in the wrong direction. That's not the wrong direction. That's the angle that the Earth. That's the angle that the moon is coming in front of the Earth. Just because you imagine the Earth being somewhere else, or you imagine the relationship being different. When you picture it in space, that's where it is. That's where the moon is coming from. That's where it is in relationship to the Earth. So same thing with you said that sometimes we witness it doing weird, strange things. We don't. We always witness the crescent moon, always the light from it pointing from the visible sun or from the sun that's set. It's always pointing that direction, and it always immediately follows the sun after sunset, or immediately leads it into sunrise every time. And I can quote that. Just like every time the eclipse, the sun is on the opposite side, or the moon is in between the sun and the Earth. And every position that the half moon, if you take that angle, it's always going to point at 90 degrees whenever it's a half moon from the sun to the moon. These positions occur every single time, and so these things are not impossible. They're just not understood by certain people. But once you take the time to learn the orbits of the moon and learn, like I did, I had to stand out on the beach one time with a rock, just circling around at sunset to try to make sense of why the moon phases look like that. And when you really, some of these things aren't intuitive, but when you really think about it and you really measure them, they fit every single time. They never do anything magical. They never do anything out of place. And that's how we were able to measure things before they happen. That's how we're able to know when the full moon's going to be, when the new moon's going to be, when the eclipses are going to be. That's all.
We have never measured eclipses. Eclipses are based on, we've seen an eclipse happen, we've seen it happen again, and we developed a pattern. It's not based on any other thing. And you're saying nothing magical happens in a selenium eclipse when the shadow of Earth comes from the top side of the moon, a completely impossible direction, and contrary to all the cartoons you've ever been shown as a child. That's not something magical, something impossible according to the heliocentric model. I'm calling bullshit. And I would advise for anybody who's watching to actually research flat Earth. And if I'm closing, I'm going to say that there's a lot of misinformation in flat Earth. Like even the YouTube stars, like they present these ideas that are kind of poison into the community. I'm going to list off them. Rockets don't work in space is garbage, equal and opposite reaction. Gravity is only density and buoyancy is garbage because there's clearly some accelerating force downwards. And the pizza pie flying through space at 9.8, ever accelerating at 9.8 meters per second is also garbage. It's just absolutely ridiculous to even think that. So be wary when you're looking at flat Earth information because there is some poison injected into society. But research flat Earth and you'll find all kinds of impossible things that happen on this supposed globe. The supposed globe is just not true. Go out, measure for yourself. That's the only thing I ask. Measure for yourself. Don't take anybody's word as knowledge. Take your own firsthand experience and your own measurements. That's the entire position of flat Earth.
I'd like to expand on the Globe Earthers rocket claims and how they claim that rockets are working in the vacuum of space. They've never been able to demonstrate to me a rocket, drone, or any type of craft doing precision maneuvers inside of a vacuum chamber here on Earth. So their rocket equation is all on paper. It cannot be demonstrated. We're talking about major physics here, and it cannot be demonstrated. This is a big problem, and I wish more people would actually look more into that. And yeah, to go a little farther, just on flat Earth, more flat Earth facts. Laser testing is showing that there's no curve. Lighthouses, people are seeing those from a lot farther than they should. All the pictures of Earth from space are admitted fake from NASA. We're seeing objects such as land, buildings, boats that are supposed to be behind the curve, and we see them anyway. NASA says we can't leave low Earth orbit. They can't even go back to the moon. They lost all the moon footage. They faked the shape of the Earth from Apollo. They faked the distance traveled. There's a video of that, and it shows clearly they were using a round window to create a round shape of Earth in a darkened cabin spacecraft that was just in high altitude. It wasn't even in low Earth orbit. They were just passengers. Even Buzz Aldrin admitted that, don't talk to me. He said, go talk to NASA. I'm just the flight crew. There's weather balloon footage from airplanes and balloons that show the horizon to be flat and always eye level. Water makes up supposedly 70% of the Earth, right? So water's always level. That's another proof. There's so many different things. And yeah, like he said, just research flat Earth.
I was going to say, Kosh still had a couple minutes left on his closing time if we wanted to allow him to extrapolate any further. Otherwise, we could call this debate.
I don't have much to say except for I did want to make a couple of say a couple of things about what we know and what we don't know. And the truth is, I brought up at the beginning about how 2,500 years ago these observations were made, these measurements. No, they were not. Some assumptions were. You have to know that these assumptions were corrected. These measurements were made more precise as time went on, as we built on what the men before us had done and spent their time doing and slaved over. And you can't refute that it's brought us fruitful things like the technology we have today and the pictures we see from space and the people that you see that are around the world that you can fly to now because of people who made things like physics and understand things like, and what was I going to say? What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I put some pictures in the box. Some pictures that will show the phenomena that we were discussing about the moons. It's very, very easy stuff. It's not magic. And then I think I posted something else. I don't remember what it was. Oh, right. The rocket propulsion. I posted a picture of that. I hope it went through. They're very possible in space. It's not. Oh, is my mic quiet? Okay, someone says my mic was quiet.
You're okay now.
Okay, sorry. I was saying nonsense anyways. So I will wrap it up by saying this, that this stuff that we know in science and the way that science works is not that you can't just not trust what everybody has done before us and throw it out. It's someone smart that told me recently. It's a lot like a crossword puzzle, where if these things weren't correct, if they were just assumptions, our crossword puzzle would be all scribble scrabble. We would not have full words everywhere we see. But the truth is, we have full words everywhere we see. And so you may be able to correct a thing here or another thing here, but you can't throw out the whole system, because it's it's evident that they are factual, they're correct, and there's not much evidence against that. There is room to perfect it, and to do that, we must first understand what the men before us have found out and use their work and correct their measurements.
Awesome. I guess, are we wrapping up the debate then? That was a closing.
Yeah, I'm going to throw 2 cents. Think for yourselves. Don't believe everything you've been taught. Know that knowledge only comes from firsthand experience. So if somebody calls in question the shape of the earth, measure it yourself. You can do that. Done. Mic drop.
Peace to everybody.